Moulay Muhammad ibn Abd al-Rahman, also known as Muhammad IV, was the Sultan of Morocco from 1859 to 1873. He was a member of the Alaouite dynasty, military chief. Born in Fez, Moulay Muhammad was a son of the Alaouite Sultan Abd al-Rahman of Morocco. During his father's reign, Muhammad commanded the Moroccan army which was defeated by the French at the Battle of Ely in August 1844. After the defeat, with his father's permission, Moulay Muhammad used his capacity as army chief to launch on a series of significant military reforms in 1845. He invited a group of Tunisian officers who had served in the Ottoman army to raise and train the first European-style regiment, the Askari, as a supplement to the usual palace guards and tribal troops. Muhammad IV set up the Madrasa al-Muhandisin, a military engineering school in Fez, supervised by the renegade French Count Joseph de Salty. Muhammad IV hired writers to translate various European textbooks on engineering and science. He was personally involved in the translation of the works of scientists such as Legendre, Newton and Lalande. He also struck deals with British Gibraltar and Egypt to receive regular contingents of Moroccan soldiers for artillery training. Sultan. Immediately upon ascension to throne in August 1859, Muhammad IV was faced with his first test. The Spanish-Moroccan War, governed by Isabella II of Spain. Raids by irregular tribesmen on the Spanish enclaves of Ceuta and Melilla in northwest Morocco prompted Spain to demand an expansion of the borders of its enclave around Ceuta. When this was refused by Muhammad IV, Spain declared war. The Spanish navy bombarded Tangier, Asla and Tetuan. A large Spanish expeditionary force landed in Ceuta, which subsequently went on to defeat the Moroccan army at the Battle of Tetuan in February 1860. The humiliating Treaty of Wad Ras, signed in April 1860, expanded the enclaves, but more worrisomely imposed a large indemnity payment on Morocco of 100 million francs, 20 times the government's budget. Provisions allowed the Spanish to hold Tetuan until it was paid. The treaty also ceded the enclave of Sidi Ifni in southwestern Morocco to Spain. After the disappointment of defeat and the crushing financial burden of the Spanish treaty, Muhammad IV gradually retired into passivity, dedicating himself to scholarly and intellectual interests in mathematics, geometry, astronomy, poetry and music, and leaving political affairs to be handled by his palace slave and effective vizier. See more so. As by treaty, half of the customs duties of all Moroccan ports were designated to pay the Spanish debt. The Alaouite Sultan's government was faced with a critical financial situation, and launched the process of Qaidization. Traditionally, the Makhzen had an understanding with the semi-autonomous rural tribes, whereby the tribal leaders agreed to hand over a portion of the taxes they collected and to supply tribesmen to the Sultan's army in times of war, but otherwise were left to manage their own affairs. The new financial difficulties from the colonial encroachment prompted the Makhzen to demand ever greater exactions of troops and taxes from the tribes. As the tribes balked and began to refuse the higher taxes, the Sultan decided to circumvent the elected tribal leaders, refusing to ratify the credentials, and instead appointed qaids of his own choosing, imposing them upon the tribes. The qaids were rarely of the same tribal stock as the tribes they governed, but were instead ambitious men, chosen primarily for the ruthless ability to crush rebellion and force the tribes to cough up. Initially designed as a centralizing move, this eventually backfired, as the qaids, once ensconced in the tribal fiefs, proved even more ungovernable than the amgas had ever been. During Muhammad IV's reign, Morocco began essentially careening into feudalism, a process that accelerated during the reign of his successor, Hassan I.